And now for a review of the stories making the newspaper headlines today, we are inviting our Arise analyst, Dr. Constance Ikoku.
Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Constance. How was your weekend?
It was good. It was good. Yolanda and Adesua, I hope you guys are good.
Good morning.
I mean, yesterday I slept so much you can't imagine.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I did too.
So refreshing Monday morning. Okay, to look at the headlines with us today, we have Dr. Iyebosa Owogaren. He is the editor, Nation's Capital of This Day newspaper, and we'll begin with this day. Finally, ECOWAS okays exit of Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso from the bloc. The Economic Community of West African States a few days ago approved the withdrawal of these countries from the regional body. From January 2025, they will cease to be members of ECOWAS. There will be a transitional period from January 29 to July 29, 2025, when the doors will still be open if they wish to reconsider their position. This certainly leads to a weakening of the bloc, as ECOWAS usually relies on collective action as a region to address challenges. And I mean, it could also encourage exit of other member states, with time, Dr. Owogaren.
Yes, the headline of this day actually captured what happened about a few days ago. But if you look at it, it is still a hypothetical issues, because they still have up to January 29 to decide whether to return or not. Of course, you remember yesterday, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu said that they are doing everything, to bring them back. But if they eventually exist from the ECOWAS, it will have some implication. It might likely affect the regional stability. Don't forget that the three countries, I'm talking of the Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, are part of the security architectures in the region. Once you have these three countries leaving that regional bloc, it will definitely create some instabilities in the region. And it will also have some economic consequences. Don't forget that there will be the economic benefit that those three countries were gaining from the regional bloc would no longer be there. Apart from that, it will also have some regional power bloc, the power alliance. Those three countries might decide to have a different alliance apart from that of the ECOWAS. So it will definitely also reduce the influence of ECOWAS in the African region. So apart from that, we are told that the ECOWAS is making a contingency plan on their exit in a way that it might not affect the ECOWAS region. But if you look at it holistically, I think the three countries exit from the ECOWAS will have some social, security, and political implications for the ECOWAS.
Charles, when you think about it, it's really a sad time for ECOWAS. A fragmented regional bloc is not what anyone wants to see at this point in time, with the external influences that this could have destabilizing the region.
Well, when you talk about fragmentation, I think ECOWAS is lucky in this case because the three countries are actually clustered in the same area. So, it's a very neat separation. Just imagine if they were, one country between Nigeria and Ghana, one country between, Senegal and Sierra Leone. That would have been real fragmentation, But then they're all together. So I'm still wondering if the three of them will be forming a three-country regional bloc.
They already did that. They already formed a three-country regional bloc. They already did that, yes.
Okay.
Not to forget the visa restrictions that have been changed. So I'm sure they have something in the book, something that's cooking.
Well, actually, they say that access to their countries in terms of trade and also in terms of transportation would also be sustained in the spirit of that friendship. So it's not a hostile alliance. Sorry, it's not a hostile relationship.
Right.
They are not members of ECOWAS now, but they are still very friendly with their erstwhile ECOWAS partners. The door is still open for them to come back if they change their minds.
Or maybe they wouldn't leave by that January deadline. You never know. Could they have negotiations ongoing. So.
Well, January
Absolutely.
is just around the corner, so who can say for sure?
So maybe
Well,
it will be a sad one if actually they exit by the end of the negotiating period, which happens to be sometime in July.
Well, we're told that the modalities, if they leave, eventually will be discussed. So a lot of things to be discussed in the long term. New Telegraph, how Azman smuggled aircraft to Mahan Air, undermining U.S. sanctions to Iran. Nigerian airline Azman is said to have helped Iran bypass sanctions imposed by the U.S. by clandestinely supplying its aircraft. According to this report, Iran seeks to exploit decline of U.S. and French influence in Africa south of the Sahara to increase its political, economic, and military influence on the continent. On November 15, 2024, Azman Air delivered an Airbus A340 642 wide-body passenger aircraft to Mahan Air of Iran. That day, while the aircraft was flying from Kano to Kabul, its crew turned off the automatic dependent surveillance broadcast transponder at an altitude of 39,000 feet after entering Iranian airspace.
Wow.
Geopolitics at play here. Dr. Wogaran were also made to know that Mahan Air exploited the negligence of the Nigerian authorities to smuggle passenger aircraft. Perhaps the Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, should have something to say about this.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure that by now the senior officials of the aviation industry should be explaining how that thing happened, because the U.S. is already accusing Nigerians of negligence. They accuse them of negligence. And the way and manner that the Azman also left the country got to a point where, when they were flying almost at about 35 meter, above the sea, they off their equipment to enable them fly through the zones. And they were shocked that they got to where they were going without Nigerian aviation authorities getting to know their mission. So it's going to cost a real diplomatic row between Nigeria and the U.S. I'm sure in the next few days, this is a running story, it's a developing story. I'm sure in the next few days, we'll get to know more about what really happened. How can such thing happen without aviation authority getting to know their mission?
Definitely. That's why in the broader context, what should concern Nigeria in this geopolitical power play between countries is how this affects them, whether it's Saudi Arabia or the US or Russia or China or Iran. Everybody seeking for a pie within the African continent. Everybody also interested in their own self-preservation. What is our own interest as a country?
Well, our own interest right now is that we are a country financially that needs to grow. We have a very hungry population. We have a poor infrastructure. So our developmental problems is our most critical concern right now. And that's one thing that has come up multiple times. Even Yolanda and I were talking about our new closer relationship with France and what our interests lie in there when other countries in the Western African region are moving back from their relationship with France. However, we have different interests, as you said, and particularly with this issue, this Azman Air, these allegations, what it is saying is that Nigeria would now, to some degree, would be seen as a safe haven for criminal activity. This is actually a new, at least for me, a new type or level of criminal activity that we're seeing. It's quite a sophisticated crime. And it said that, it's not just Nigeria, but Iran has also looked at Burkina Faso, I believe. It's looked at Gambia. So it's looked at the DRC as places to register their airplanes to try and supersede these
escape the sanctions. You're talking about escaping sanctions.
Escape the sanctions. And Nigeria should not be seen as a safe haven for this type of criminal activity.
I think it's it's quite embarrassing for the nation to find itself involved in this kind of scam, and it also means that Nigeria will be coming very, very much under the scrutiny of the United States government and probably Israel.
Well, let's leave out U.S. sanctions. The most important thing in the long term, U.S. is fighting for its own interests. African countries should also fight for their own interests. Let's look at the Guardian newspaper. Nigerian fiscal edge. Piles of 4 trillion unfunded deficit in 12 months. This Guardian report does a good job of outlining or providing an overview of the 2023 budget performance. So let's look at the debt service to revenue ratio is 68.5%, which is high. Debt service itself is 10.55 trillion naira. Earned revenue, 12.5 trillion. That gap between the earned and the debt service is very small. Total capital expenditure is 6.4 trillion naira. Fiscal deficit, 10.55 trillion. And unfunded deficit, 3.95 trillion naira. A lot of figures there, but all these figures have profound implications for the country, and we've already seen that inflationary pressures, excessive borrowing, money printing, debt accumulation, and currency depreciation. We're still, looking at all of this, and climbing out of this hole will really take a lot of work, Dr. Owogaren.
Yeah, you are right. In spite of what they've been telling us that our economy is progressing, but if you look at this number, you don't need anybody to tell you that we are in serious economic crisis. If you spend that huge amount of money in servicing your debt, and you also look at the ways and means, the money they borrowed, and look at how much they spend in capital projects, and look at the money, how much they earned, in the total money they earned, you will know that in spite of what they've been telling us, our economic is progressing, is going up. But from this figure, you don't need anyone to tell you that we're in a serious economic crisis. So I think that what we need to do is see how we can generate more revenue rather than borrowing almost every time, because the figure is not funny at all. It's not looking good. So those who are involved in managing the economy should be up and doing. They should do something very drastically and see how they can, resolve the issues.
And Charles, some would argue that fiscal deficit, is not inherently a bad thing or harmful. It just depends on how the country utilizes the funds and whether these funds are channeled to growth-enhancing initiatives.
When we talk about, these policies or these theories, so to say, I look at it in terms of the effect on the life of the common man, and that's why it becomes very, very alarming. Because when you have a negative turn of events like this, then rest assured that it's going to affect maybe our exchange rate, it's going to affect the prices of commodities in the market, it's going to affect the price of transportation, and it's definitely going to make things a lot harder for the ordinary Nigerian on the street. That's what makes it all the more alarming. And then come to think of it, the headline says Nigeria on the brink. So yeah. What's the worst case scenario if the country actually goes over? Right.
The Punch. Argon NULGE kicks as governors get 2 trillion naira LG allocations. In spite of the Supreme Court ruling on local government autonomy, findings show that 2.08 trillion naira in local government allocations between July and December 2024 was paid to state government accounts. Members of the Association of Local Governments of Nigeria and National Union of Local Governments are unhappy about this. The landmark Supreme Court ruling in July 2024 had directed that the funds for LGs should be paid directly into their accounts. This one, first came the judgment, and then what we now have to deal with is the actual implementation and practicability of that judgment.
Yes, and isn't that where Nigeria usually seems to suffer? It's in the implementation of the judgments, the implementation of the policies. It's fair that the local government organizations are pushing back, particularly because of the large amounts that we're seeing in the FAC allocations going to the states. I mean, nominally larger than we've probably ever seen before. But, ultimately, the problem is that people are not benefiting from this money in ways that they want to see. And when we come to see the new 2025 budget, when we're looking at our state budgets going forward into the next year, we also need to see what is that money being put towards.
Right. Very good points you raised. Let's look at other papers. Daily Independent, Tinubu asks ECOWAS emulate Ghana's democratic practice. Serap sues Tinubu over humanitarian affairs ministries missing 57 billion naira. FG secures convictions over 200 terrorism suspects, 20 feared dead in both mishap in Benue. Also, let's see Daily Sun. Ahamba, others hail as Chukwu emerges Ohaneze general for remaining 27 days. Tear sorrow in Benue, we've seen that. Now to the international headlines that we have this morning. Daily Graphic, 460,000 WASC candidates' fate hangs. The West African Senior School Certificate Examination Council has not been able to complete the marking of scripts for over 400,000 students due to non-adequate funding. It's waiting for an outstanding 108 million Ghanaian cedi from the Ministry of Education to procure some equipment. What a situation, Yolanda. Students unable to receive their results due to lack of funding. I mean, priority should be given to education here.
Absolutely. Priority should indeed be given to education. But I also see this as a two-edged sword, because in as much as there's a lack of funding and there's a lack of resources, this number also indicates a quite high number of students that are leaving high school. And this just goes to show how many of our, how much our future is just at our fingertips. It's a very unfortunate situation, and like I often say, although not positive, this seems to be the African story, that we struggle with such small issues as this when we have over almost 500,000, 500,000 students that are trying to, go ahead with their lives. Charles, it seems you had something to say.
Yes, because when they talk about lack of funding, lack of funding for what? Is it lack of funding for those who are marking the scripts? I mean, that's
so they require some equipment.
It's
like the equipment, yes, such as scanners and all. They talk about there are certain kind of cards that are used
to verify the results.
So they need this to be bought.
One would think that before the exams were written, all these had been provided for. So there is a systemic failure somewhere along the line.
Right.
Absolutely.
Citizen, not enough water tankers. Johannesburg water crisis, still in the spotlight again. People have been told that if they don't stock up water, they will be in a major crisis. The water problem persists in that country. Let's go to Daily Mail. Boris's rallying cry as Starmer sets up Whitehall EU surrender squad. I call on everyone who cares about democracy to fight, fight, and fight, according to Boris Johnson. It's not a laughing matter, he's serious. I mean, it was going to come to this, right? Keir Starmer attempts to renegotiate Brexit, and he has set up 100 civil servants. A lot of people are saying these are people that are being used to surrender to EU. But this battle is going to be epic, Yolanda.
Epic indeed. This choice of words for this headline, there's a few things I'd like to point out.
British
Referring
newspapers.
to a negotiating team as a surrender squad, wow, that uses loaded language that frames the efforts in a very negative light. And as well, I don't know if I'm seeing clearly, but I know that Starmer is often referred to as Stammer because they often make fun of how he speaks and how sometimes, he's not very diplomatic in how he talks as other politicians. And I find this in, I don't know, it's in poor taste to speak this way in such a headline.
And I was laughing
British papers are this why. This is not new. Their headlines are usually meant to bite.
Absolutely.
Definitely. But I was laughing earlier, not that it's a laughing matter, but I was laughing earlier because of Boris Johnson's call to fight, fight, fight.
Right.
When he really led that Brexit charge. And now the UK has to deal with the consequences of their action. They have to deal with the fallout from the decision. And, it's very bizarre when a politician chooses to have a stance that might benefit them personally and it benefited him personally. But then the people are now, the fishermen and the young people of the UK are now trying to get a hand because now they're going to be separated from the rest of Europe.
Okay, let's quickly look at The Sun. Spiral exclusive, banned old Duke of York, Andy told to stay away from the Christmas party. Palace sources say the onus is on him to keep a low profile following the scandal over a Chinese spy he contracted to negotiate businesses on his behalf. Dr. Wogaran, come in here, just 30 seconds before we wrap up.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the UK Prime Ministers, that we should situate the comment by Boris that, you know, you remember when the Prime Minister was campaigning, he did promise that he had no intentions of returning UK to the BRICS, to the EU. But I think now there's every indication that he lied to millions of people. I'm sure that is what informed Boris' statement, where he said, if people want freedom, they must fight, fight, and fight. And so I just wanted to situate that comment.
A lot of it's a developing story, so we'll see how that goes. I'm afraid that's all we have for the paper review this morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Owogaren, for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Constance Ikoko, as always, for the riveting newspaper review. That's all the time we have for you here on Daybreak. It's goodbye from me. I'm Adeso Akibalsage.
Please do keep it here on Arise News. I'm Charles Eruka.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. The morning show is next. Goodbye.